Hey, so in this video I'm going to introduce the range-based for loop, which was introduced in C++11. Now this simplifies the repeated execution of statements for each element in a collection, so for each element in that range. Here we have a quick example. You can see for is the same. You have for the parentheses and then the braces or the curly braces for the body as usual, but between the parentheses this is where it looks quite different. Instead of int I is equal to 0, semicolon, your condition, and then another semicolon, and then you go and increment your loop control variable. Instead what we do here is this expression. So you have the variable type, the variable name, then a colon, and then the collection name. So the name of your array, for example, and you can see that the subscript operator, or those brackets that we use for the array, is not passed in. You only pass in the name. Then in the body, we set the variable name successively to each element in the collection name. So basically it's similar to how we did it before. The first iteration, you're going to have the first element, so index 0, and so whatever the element is in index 0 is going to be assigned to that variable name. So variable name will be the same as that first element. Then the body executes. We start at the top again, and now that variable name is going to be equal to the next element, or set to whatever that next element in your collection is. So instead of having to do this manually by going in and passing in the loop control variable, so the iterator, you pass that in to access the element within that collection. Instead of doing that, we simply go and use the variable name. So some of the positive things here is this is much faster and easier to write out, and it provides access to each element with minimal code. We don't have to write code to increment iterators. So you don't have a loop control variable that you have to increment each time, so with each repetition of this loop. And we don't have to worry about the size of the collection or about specifying the index, because again we can simply access those elements using the variable name. And this is important because, as I mentioned before, you can try and access things that are out of the bounds of your collection. So you can try and access something, especially the final element, right, that you can get that confused with the index. And especially as a beginner as well, you might start at 1 when really once again you have to start at 0, because that's how arrays work. You start with the index 0 and not 1. So with this we don't have to worry about it. We know that it's going to repeat for each element that we have in the container. One thing to note here is that the collection name, so let's say you have an array of integers, so int, demo array, something like that. The variable type here needs to match that. So if you have integers, once again variable type here will also be integer. If you have an array of floats, then of course that variable type will be floats, and so on. You also have auto, but we'll talk about auto in another lecture. So here's a quick demonstration. In main I simply have this demo array with these elements, so 1 to 10. And so what is the for each loop for? Well, for each element in that container, in this case demo array, I want to execute a bunch of statements, one or more statements. So we write this for loop for each element in that array. Go and execute this body, go and execute these statements. And you can see how easy this code is. All I do here is int. You can see this variable type is the same as what you have for the container, in this case array. We will talk about different other types such as vectors in the next module, so module 1 or 2. So you have demo array, then you have the variable name. This is similar to the loop control variable in the other loop types such as while loop, for loop, and so on. But we don't have to manually increment this with each repetition of the for loop. So int x, that is our variable that we can access now within the body. We have the colon, and then we specify what array or what collection it is that we want to loop over or iterate through, demo array in this case. And then I just print those elements out, so cout x, and then I just have a space here as well. Control F5 to run, you can see it will print those out. Once again you'll notice that we don't need to go and do demo array, the subscript operator, so those brackets, pass it in the index I, something like that. You don't have to do that with the range-based for loop. So really simple one, very handy. This is especially handy when you use it with the auto type or keyword, as we'll see in the next video.